Very good afternoon to all of you present here. This is Aiswariya Chidambaram. I'm a senior research analyst working with the life sciences division of a global consulting company called Frost & Sullivan. I'm sure most of you over here must have heard of Frost & Sullivan, the growth consulting and market research company. And we've been in this business for almost more than 50 years now, having established in 1961. And today we are a team of almost over 1,800 global analysts spread across 42 different locations. And we have an industry coverage of a lot of segments, not only healthcare. I mean, I represent the healthcare team. We also have industry verticals like the chemicals, materials and food, the information communication practice, the automotive space, and many such verticals. So coming to our topic for today's presentation, that is the global biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing market, qualitative and quantitative analysis. So as the name itself suggests, this is going to be a presentation which will target more about the market scenario, a little bit about the market trends, the pulling and pushing forces of the contract manufacturers, the outsourcing trends, and particularly what the future holds for biopharmaceutical contract manufacturers, because this is one area where there's a lot of, I would say, a lot of interest for companies, particularly CMOs, as far as outsourcing is concerned, particularly with regard to biopharmaceuticals. So we would also see in the due course what the competitive landscape looks like, because we've conducted a detailed research study on the biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing market. And I've been the author of the study, and I've been tracking this market for quite some time. So I would like to take this opportunity to share some of the key findings of this research report. If not all the proprietary information, at least I would like to touch upon the key points. And at the end of this presentation, you can feel free, in case you have any other clarifications or you'd like to know anything more in detail, please feel free to contact me. Even my information is provided in the contact slide over here, so you could even feel free to write to me in case you need something more in detail or you would like to have a copy of the full report. So biopharmaceuticals, as we all know, is deemed to be the length and the breadth of healthcare in future. Now, when we say this, why exactly do we feel that biopharmaceuticals, has got so much of hype, and why is it the in focus topic today? This is simply because of the target specificity, the more effective and potent activity of biopharmaceuticals as compared to the smaller molecules. So biopharmaceuticals are generally also called as the large molecules. So today, if you look at the look at most of the therapies which are available for a variety of diseases, most of them are only able to manage the disease or just address the symptoms of the disease. There are very few therapeutics in market which actually try to cure a disease, or rather even prevent the occurrence of a disease. So this is one area where biopharmaceuticals have immense potential as target to cure the disease completely, or even prevent in the form of vaccines and other larger biopharmaceuticals. Now, if you look at the two conventionally approved methods of biopharmaceutical manufacturing which are currently available and are practiced, they are the mammalian-based manufacturing, where the proteins are expressed in mammalian cells like mice, rabbits, and so on. And the second one is the microbial or the microorganism-based manufacturing, where the proteins are expressed in microorganisms like yeast and bacteria. So these are the two methods which are currently available in the market, although there are a lot of new techniques which are still being explored, like say transgenics or stem cell technology for the production of biopharmaceuticals, but these are still in a very infancy stage. If you look at this particular chart, we try to do a sort of a efficacy analysis or comparative analysis between the small molecules and the large molecules. So when I say large molecules, we have both the biosimilars as well as the biologics. So as far as the small molecules are concerned, we are trying to talk about the commodity generics. And typically, if you look at the cost to build, equip, and validate a biomanufacturing facility and to bring a biopharmaceutical on market, it takes as high as $350 to $900 million, and the time required could be anywhere between 8 to 12 years. And for a biosimilar, of course, it is slightly lesser. It's about $100 to $200 million. Whereas if you look at the cost and the time to bring a commodity generic to market, it typically takes just $5 million, and it's just half the time. So this is as complex and as intense to manufacture a biopharmaceutical product and launch in the market. But also, if you look at the marketing investment analysis, you can see that the pricing of biopharmaceuticals or large molecules is definitely a premium pricing. So they command premium pricing in the market because it's obvious that it's such a complex process to manufacture, and there are a lot of entry barriers and risks associated with biopharmaceuticals. So because of this, the cost is also quite high and the investing is quite high as compared to the small molecules. So typically the large molecules are commercially attractive segments because they offer profit margins as high as 40%, whereas the small molecules is just about 20%. But then they are also quite a risky segment to enter into. Now, if you look at the biopharmaceutical market, talking about the overall market, there are four key segments, as you can see here in this graph. One would be the most important segment, that is monoclonal antibodies, which represents about almost 50% of the market in terms of revenue share. The second would be the recombinant proteins, which occupies about, say, 35%, followed by vaccines at 10% and insulin at 6%. So the monoclonals and recombinant proteins are the two big chunks of revenue contributors in the biopharmaceutical market. And if you look at the geographical spread, US and Europe, these are the two large markets as far as the big molecules are concerned because of the technological challenging formulations, followed by Asia, which is just at 10%. Now, Asia is just a very small market, which is at an infancy stage for biopharmaceuticals, but then it's growing very significantly as more companies try to enter into the biosimilar sector. So this is about the geographic and the therapeutic overview of the biopharmaceutical market in general. Now, if you look at this chart, it's a very interesting analysis which we conducted about the changing or the evolving business. Oh, sorry, I think I'm pressing this. Okay. Sorry, yeah. It's a very interesting analysis as far as the changing business model of the big pharma companies. Now, as of 2012, if you see, almost 90% of the revenue for big pharma comes from small molecules. Now, over the next 5 years, if you see, there's going to be a steady but a gradual increase in the revenue contribution of big molecules or biopharmaceuticals as compared to the small molecules. So by 2017, we see that almost 25% of the revenue could come from the large molecules as compared to the small molecules. And when I say large molecules, almost 50% of that is going to be contributed by monoclonal antibodies. Now, coming to the crux of today's presentation about contract outsourcing and about contract manufacturing, we all know that outsourcing has always been looked upon as a cost-cutting tool or a cost-cutting strategy by most of the pharma companies. But then today, this is just a traditional view. But then today, all the pharma companies or biopharma companies, they would like to look at contract manufacturers as a risk-sharing business model. They would like to entrench them at every stage of their value chain, right from the time a new biological entity comes out of the lab till the time it is going to be launched and commercialized on the market. They would like to involve the contract manufacturers in every stage of their life cycle. So there's definitely going to be a lot of benefits as far as outsourcing is concerned, apart from just being a cost-efficient tool. Now, if you look at the contract manufacturing market, as I told you that there are two important segments. One is the mammalian-based manufacturing segment, and the other one is the microbial. Almost 2/3 of the revenue contribution today comes from the mammalian-based manufacturing sector, and only 1/3 comes from microbial-based. And similarly, we also see that the growth rates projected are higher for mammalian-based manufacturing as compared to microbial-based manufacturing. Now, the reason for this being, mammalian-based manufacturing methods are highly suitable for glycosylated complex proteins, for example, monoclonals or recombinant proteins. Whereas microbial manufacturing is still a relatively older technology when it comes to the glycosylated proteins. So not many CMOs look at this as a suitable option or a feasible option for manufacturing of monoclonals and other large molecules. So when we try to do a sort of analysis with a lot of CMOs and companies in the biopharmaceutical space, we estimated that there could be capacity additions in the mammalian-based manufacturing market as high as 66% over the next 5 years, particularly in the mammalian manufacturing sector. whereas there are companies who are trying to shut down plants or reduce capacities in the microbial space. Now, what could be the pulling and pushing factors of the biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing market? I would like to take you through this, each of these factors in detail with substantial evidence. Now, if you look at this chart, this gives you the breakdown of the biopharmaceutical manufacturing costs in terms of both the process and in terms of the components which are involved. So if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, it shows you very clearly that downstream processing itself occupies almost 40% of the cost as far as biopharmaceutical manufacturing is concerned. So this is definitely a big challenge for most of the companies because purifying a product, or it's even easier to manufacture the product, but isolating the product from impurities still remains a great challenge. Similarly, upstream processing contributes almost about 30%. Now, as far as the components are concerned, biopharmaceutical manufacturing is definitely a capital-intensive sector. So the capital investment itself is almost about 35% of costs involved, followed by the utilities and the fixed assets and regulatory costs, labor costs, so on and so forth. So having said this, I'm sure that it's going to make a lot of sense to companies to leverage the expertise of CMOs, which are already well equipped with the required technology, the required resource, the personnel, and they're also well versed with regulatory nuances. So it's definitely going to be a feasible and a more strategic option for companies, particularly the mid-sized and the smaller companies who are looking to enter into the biopharmaceutical space. Patent cliff. This morning, I think we heard a lot about biosimilars from Mr. Shepherd's presentation, for those of you who are present here. And definitely we know that biosimilars is a huge market potential which is still untapped by a lot of companies. So I would like to show you in my presentation the list of some of the key blockbuster biologics which are likely to come out of patent protection and likely to get into the biosimilars mode. Some of them have already, the biosimilars are available for some of the biologics, for some of which the patents are going to be expired between 2010 to 2020. So between this 10 years, we foresee that there are going to be blockbuster biologics worth over 100 billion likely to lose patent protection, and there could be cheaper generic versions or biosimilar versions entering into the market. Now you can ask me, what does this mean to contract manufacturers, or in what way is this going to be really impeding the growth of, or rather accelerating the growth of biopharmaceutical contract manufacturers? Now, as I told you, manufacturing of biologics and biopharmaceuticals is a complex process, right? So it's not very easy to reproduce a copycat version of a biopharmaceutical or a biologic. So initially, the generic companies are likely to leverage the expertise of CMOs when they enter into the sector, and this means definitely business opportunities for CMOs. Now, what's in the pipeline for biopharmaceuticals? Definitely, this is also going to be a key factor which is going to drive the growth of CMOs. If you look at the chart over here, I've tried to highlight the number of drug candidates in various stages of clinical pipeline for the top 5 countries in Europe, that is the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. So if you look at the graph, UK leads the European region with almost over 230 drug candidates in the pipeline, closely followed by Germany at 150 drug candidates. And there are more than 1,200 biopharmaceuticals in the pipeline currently in US, out of which more than 50% are represented by the key 5 countries in Europe. And also, more than 50% of the pipeline drug candidates are monoclonal antibodies. So this itself shows that there's going to be tremendous growth for the mammalian-based manufacturing methods. Now, if you look at the venture capitalist funding scenario, the funding analysis for the biopharmaceutical companies, it's always been, I would say, fluctuating over the last couple of years. Now, it's very alarming to note that most of the venture capitalist firms are trying to support biopharmaceutical companies which have promising late-stage candidates, that is, say, phase 3 or phase 2 candidates, and they show lesser interest to the emerging companies which have, preclinical molecules, just, they're, as far as drug discovery is concerned, they're not very much favorable to invest in such companies which just have a proprietary technology platform and they're trying to build products based on the technology platform, or which have products in the preclinical phase or phase 1 stages. They're trying to favor companies which have products in the late stage and which are likely to be launched, as this could be more profitable. And also the capital allocation scenario is greater towards the US as compared to Europe, because they feel that US is recouping a little faster from the economic recession in 2009 as compared to Europe. Now, if you look at the technology scenario, it's pretty simple, because it's going to be a key aspect as far as biopharmaceutical manufacturing is concerned, because biopharmaceuticals by themselves are very technically challenging formulations, and they're not that easy to manufacture. Now, this can be very broadly segmented into three types. Okay, so any sort of development or improvements which are likely to happen are with regard to these three important aspects. One is going to be the disposable or the single-use technology. So when you say disposables, we know that this is particularly suited to enhance productivity, to switch over between operations, and definitely it's suited for multi-product contract manufacturing and for busy and lean operations. Now, with regard to upstream and downstream, I think we saw in one of the slides where the cost breakdown was shown that there's a lot of challenge with regard to upstream and downstream manufacturing, which is why the cost is so high. So technology improvements and developments to reduce the challenges and to improve the production of a product, or to improve the productivity or the efficacy of the biomanufacturing process is definitely an area under research. And then the third trend which we see is process automation, right? That is the process analytical technologies, where companies are increasingly trying to automate processes than involve more manual intervention. So this is not only going to minimize error, but it's also going to increase the accuracy and precision of the process. So any sort of technology innovation or trend is with regard to these three. It can be categorized under these three segments in the biopharmaceutical manufacturing space. Now, the competitive landscape scenario, I told you we did a very detailed study as far as this biopharmaceutical CMOs are concerned. So we try to segment them in terms of their market shares and capacity shares. So there are two ways you can segment CMOs. One is with regard to the revenue shares, that is a market shares. And the second thing is with regard to the capacities shares, like the amount of the total capacity which they have for biopharmaceutical manufacturing. Now, the tier 1 participants are primarily the Lonza Group and the Boehringer Ingelheim, because these two are the companies which almost have a stake of as high as, say, 70 to 75% in the biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing space. The tier 2 participants, I've mentioned the key companies over here, though not all have been mentioned. These would be at least 80% of the tier 2 companies. We have Sandoz, we have Fujifilm Diosynth, Royal DSM, and we have Rentschler Biotechnology. So these are the key CMOs, biopharmaceutical CMOs, as far as the tier 2 companies are concerned. And then we have a host of tier 3 companies, a lot of tier 3 companies, some of which I've mentioned. Everything couldn't be accommodated over here. So if you need the entire list, you can get in touch with me, because we've done a detailed profiling of each of these companies in our report. Okay, now this is a very interesting kind of a survey or an end-user analysis which we did while we were trying to, ask pharma companies. Now, the end users over here, the end user group includes all categories of pharma companies, the big pharma companies, emerging pharma companies, specialty pharma companies, as well as the generic pharmaceutical companies. Right, so we tried to find out what could be the key competitive factors that would influence a biopharmaceutical company when they're trying to outsource their manufacturing to a contract manufacturer. That's nothing but a CMO. So they came up with a list of factors, but the top 10 factors were these as shown in the slide, out of which quality, the timely delivery, and cost. These three were the most important factors which were rated quite high among all the categories of pharma companies. So these three factors play a major role in influencing the decision of choosing a CMO. Now, anticipating capacity demand, excuse me, this is going to be a pretty tricky or a dicey speculation for most of these CMOs. And it's very important that CMOs take a cautious decision as far as their capacity expansions and investments are concerned. Now, traditionally, if you look at the biopharmaceutical industry, it has always been alternating between cycles of inadequate capacity or excess capacity, or inadequate capacity or excess capacity. There's always been a fluctuation. Currently, if you look at the scenario, there is definitely greater capacity supply than the actual demand for biopharmaceutical manufacturing. And we predict that this scenario would keep continuing at least for the next couple of years until 2015. And maybe as more new products come into market and biosimilars enter into market, there could be a balance in terms of demand and supply over the next 5 years, and then there could be the scenario could turn the other way around. Now, it's very crucial that companies make a careful decision when they're trying to invest in expanding their capacities or starting a new manufacturing plant, or else they would be hit by overcapacity, and this could even force a lot of companies, because it has done in the past that it could force a lot of companies to exit the CMO business model. Particularly if you see today, a lot of captive manufacturers are trying to shut down their plants or sell the excess capacities they have, simply because this proves to be unprofitable, or it works out to be cheaper for them to outsource to CMOs. So there is a clear trend as far as the outsourcing demand is concerned. There's definitely a higher rate of demand for outsourcing, but then it's very important they choose the product segments and the investment decisions and make the investment decisions in a right way, so that they're not hit by overcapacity. Well, what can be expected in the future? So the future perspective for biopharmaceutical CMOs, it can be looked at 4 broad levels. One with regard to technology. So when we say technology, as I told you, that there are a lot of novel technologies for manufacturing biopharmaceuticals also, like the transgenic technologies, use of transgenic plants and animals to produce biopharmaceuticals, stem cell technologies, cloning technologies. Okay, now these are still a very infancy stage, and it could take, say, about another 10 to 15 years for them to actually get commercialized. But once they get commercialized, it's going to have a very strong impact on the CMOs, because the CMOs which are currently available are based on the 2 traditional methods of mammalian and microbial manufacturing. The next level is about therapeutics, and this deals with the development of RNA-based therapeutics, antisense therapeutics, and the 2 most important groups of biopharmaceuticals, that is monoclonals and recombinant proteins. Now, looking at the government, it's very important that both the CMOs and the biopharma companies are abreast of the regulatory guidelines, the regulatory policies, and it's very important that because these policies are going to decide the approval rates of new molecules. Not only that, they are also going to be establishing a lot of regulatory pathway for the biosimilars. Like, for example, if you take EMEA, it's pretty much active in trying to establish biosimilars, a proper regulatory guideline for biosimilars, which will directly have an impact on the biopharmaceutical and contract manufacturing markets. As far as globalization is concerned, we all know that the industry is consolidating in a big way. When I say consolidation, it's not just between the CMOs. It's between the CMOs and the big pharma companies, between CMOs and technology providers. There's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Now, not only that, there are also certain companies which are trying to acquire only one particular manufacturing site or one particular manufacturing plant from another company, because they have excess capacities, they want to sell it, or they want to shut down a plant. There's always another company who's willing to acquire it. Now, this happens when a company wants to expand into a new geographic segment, or when they want to expand into a new product portfolio, like, for example, say semi-solids or liquids, or it could be any other segment. So globalization in terms of acquisitions and consolidation is increasing big time in the biopharmaceutical market and is expected to continue over the next 5 years. And the next important thing is the opening and the expansion of Asian markets. Even though the Asian markets are currently at an infancy stage, or they contribute to a small revenue contribution, we see that in the next 5 years, or in the next 10 years, I would say that the Asian markets would at least occupy 25% of the revenue share of the global biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing market. Because since I personally come from India, I can see that there are a lot of companies in India, like, say, Dr. Reddy's, or Biocon. We have companies like Intas, Wockhardt, Kemwell Biopharma, a lot of companies which are eyeing on the biosimilar space. So this could definitely change the scenario, and there could be a shift in balance between the Western and the European markets as well. Yeah, so these are the key points as far as the future directions for biopharmaceutical contract manufacturers are concerned. I've even summarized them for you over here. And I think as consultants, it's very important for us to add value to give some of the strategic recommendations for CMOs. Right, because if you see today there are a lot of companies which are planning to enter into the space. At the same time, there are also a lot of companies which are exiting the contract manufacturing business. So we try to look at it at three different levels. One is reacting to change, another one is anticipating the change, and the third one is leading the change. Now when we say reacting to change, it's very simple, that we need to first decide upon the correct therapeutic segments and the product segments that we would like to enter into, right? So this is very important. Deciding the proper market segment where you would like to position your offerings and services is quite important. And then customizing your needs according to customer preferences is very important. So that plays a key role. And of course, complying with new government policies. Now, that is going to be very important, particularly for the Asian-based CMOs. Now, you got to be extremely compliant and extremely conversant with the regulatory guidelines if you want to enter into the space. Anticipating change, it's very important, as I showed you in my previous slide, the capacity expansions. Now, that's going to be a very tricky game. You might not really know, what could be the industry utilization rate, what could be the demand for outsourcing in one particular product segment. So it's very important companies foresee capacity requirements well, and they strike the deal with the right set of companies. Like, consolidation or inorganic growth in terms of acquisition is very important. So it's very important that companies strike a deal with the right partners. So that's quite important. And then researching on customer preferences through end user surveys or periodic interaction with customers is very important to understand what exactly they have in mind and what is the changing needs of customers. And most importantly, CMOs are also required to keep themselves updated of the new technology advancements, because in and out there are a lot of technology changes, developments, improvements which are happening. So it's very important that customers are also abreast, the CMOs are also abreast with regard to that. Leading the change, it's crucial that CMOs pioneer new and better technologies as well. It's not just they are, building biomanufacturing facilities according to the products which are going to be launched in the market. It's very important they are well versed with the pipeline, the new delivery mechanisms, the technologies, and accordingly they come up with new and better solutions and innovate products. We can also see some of the leading CMOs like Lonza and Boehringer. They are also actively involved in innovating new products, biobetters, and so on and so forth, and seeking to set new industry standards. So if you're going to be setting the benchmark in the industry, definitely you are far ahead of competition, and it's going to take a lot of time for the other companies to come close to this level. So these are the strategic positions, I would say, for CMOs who are in the biopharmaceutical space, and it's quite crucial that they align their offerings and services as per the needs of their customers to stay updated about the market and to emerge as successful CMOs in such a highly competitive market and in a fragmented market as contract manufacturing. Because today we see that there are more than 300 CMOs, biopharmaceutical CMOs exclusively, I'm saying globally. So and we also see that a lot of companies were trying to enter into the segment. So it's getting highly competitive, intensely competitive. So it's very important that companies make careful choices and decisions to stay in this market. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But before that, I would like to tell you that I do have the entire report of this particular study. So those of you who are interested to know numbers, particularly with regard to revenue forecasts or growth rates, with regard to market segments or geographic segments, please do write to me. We have a complete report on that. Also, we have certain related market research reports on the global pharmaceutical contract manufacturing market. So this report is segmented in terms of finished dose formulations, like say the solid dose, the injectables, and the liquid and semi-solid dose formulations. So we have a complete global report featuring US, Europe, and the Asian markets. So if any of you are interested, you could even get in touch with me for this. And we have a global next generation biosimilars market, which talks about the various segments in the biosimilar market, the growth rates of the segments. And this is an in-depth, in-detailed report which covers all geographic segments, like including LATAM, Eastern Europe, apart from the developed markets. And also the drug discovery outsourcing market and the clinical research outsourcing market. So those of you who are interested could definitely get in touch with me for these reports. We'll be able to provide you at least the key findings, if not the entire report. If you're interested to buy the reports, you could definitely write to me. Yes, so any questions?
My question is regarding the numbers actually. You have not presented the detailed numbers, but in your report, have you worked out that globally or regionally, what is the total capacity in terms of fermentation capacity which is available for microbial and mammalian, and how much it is utilized geographically? So have you gone into deep and worked out, and how it is changing? How that scenario is changing over the years, or going to change over the years actually?
Okay,
this is very specifically actually, the numbers.
Okay. As far as the capacity is concerned, if you're going to ask me the exact figures of the global capacity for biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing, we don't have the global figures for that. But then we have a chart which shows you about the trends or the forecasts of industry utilization of biopharmaceutical capacities. Right, so right now I can tell you that the utilization rate in the industry is somewhere between 60 to 65% as far as biopharmaceutical manufacturing is concerned. So it's just 60 to 65%. So there's a surplus of say 30 to 35 to 40%. So that is one thing, but we don't have the global figures for the capacity overall in terms of microbial and mammalian. But I can definitely tell you the key factors which are going to, alter the scenario of capacity demand, because I told you in my presentation that we see in the next couple of years that there's going to be a balance, or there could even be surplus, there could even be excess demand than the supply. Now that is simply because of the fact that there are a lot of pipeline molecules, a lot of biopharmaceuticals which are going to be launched, the biosimilar space as well. And we also see an increasing trend of biopharma companies adopting the big pharma business model. So all these factors combined together are likely to change the pharma model from the small molecule to the big molecule business. So obviously there's going to be a greater utilization of capacity in the biopharmaceutical industry.
If I can continue my question actually.
Yeah.
See, as an industry, our interest is from a company like Frost & Sullivan to know more specific about how do you see the numbers for microbial and mammalian and how this is changing, because we estimate and we understand that the general scenario which is being presented actually is also changing very rapidly, because more and more fragments of monoclonal antibodies are coming which are expressed in the microbial systems actually. You see more of like products like FAB fragments coming or diabodies coming which are expressed in the E. coli. So the demand over the years, over a period of time, will again come back to the microbial systems. And this is what we are seeing a lot of academic experts now talking about, that the whole scenario would change in the next 2 decades, and then we would come back, which I do not see from your presentation. So are you also viewing those changes coming, or have you assessed any numbers for it?
Yeah, if you want numbers for this, we don't have the numbers included in this particular study for capacity. We don't have but we just have done a sort of competitive profiling in terms of capacity shares. That we have done, but the global the capacity, I know you're asking in terms of liters, right? So no, that's not available in this report. That's why I have not really touched upon that over here.
You said you go into deep and do that.
Sorry?
This is what we wish actually, that a group like you have the capacity, you can go, because, as an industry, if you go and ask a competitor, they're never going to share that information.
But I can tell you one thing, we have a report in 2011 on the European biopharmaceutical contract manufacturing markets, where we do have some figures about the industry capacity utilization and the actual capacity, both in terms of contract manufacturing and captive manufacturing. But that corresponds only to Europe. If you're interested to know about that, you can definitely get in touch with me. We have the numbers for that.
Thank you.